So one obvious issue with what we currently have going on is that when I press play, and when I hop down to this right here, my ball just sort of goes off screen. And that's not convenient for anyone. It's not convenient for me. It's not convenient for the player. So we should probably fix that. So this is where we're going to start jumping into a really tiny bit of coding. So if you're not a computer science major or you're not comfortable with programming, don't worry. We're going really slow. If you're extremely adverse to programming for whatever reason, I've already posted the assets that you'll need for all the programming sections on the Facebook group, so you can go and download those. You can sort of load them onto your project and just use those instead. But let's start on making our camera follow the player. So the way we're going to do that is you can either right-click here or just go over to the Create menu in your project, and then go down and press C# script. Now I'm going to call it camera follow. No spaces, just camera follow. Cool. So if you double-click on camera follow, it will start opening up. For me, it'll be MonoDevelop. If you're on a Windows computer, it might be Visual Studio. Whatever you have installed, I'll open up something like this. So if you go over to Unity, you're going to double-click on your C# script, and it'll pop you over to that. And this is what you should see on your respective computers. Yeah. You're going to go to Create and then C# script. Yep. Good? Cool. So we have two things to start out with here. Start and update. And to give you a little tip, but let's go over it a bit more. So the way the objects work in Unity is that you pretty much start out with an empty game object in every scenario, and then we just keep slapping things onto it until it starts looking cool. So for something like our cube, it actually started out as an empty game object, and then we add a mesh that looks like a cube, and then we add something else that lets it be drawn to the screen, and then we add something else that lets it interact with the physics engine. And you just keep on adding things onto it, things like lights, things like all these, right? There's a lot of options. We aren't going to go over all of them. But that's actually how all of our code works too. So any scripts that we write, we just sort of plop them onto objects, and then it works on those objects and gets called on them. So we have start and update. So start is going to get called whenever an object enters the scene. So if the object's already in the scene, so like our roller ball starts out in the scene when we press play, it's going to get called pretty much right when we press play. But maybe we spawn something in later. If we spawn something in later, then start will get called then. So usually, and they say this here, you use it for initialization. So you set up things, you start like, maybe when it comes into the scene, a big explosion happens. So you're like, okay, when you come in, like, make it look really cool and like blow up right now or something like that. So everything that you do right when you start, you're going to do in start. It's a good name. And then we have update. So update, they say, gets called once per frame. The way that games and VR experiences, everything in real-time graphics work, is that we render a frame to the screen, and then we render another one. And we keep doing that really, really fast. So we can get up to like 60 frames per second, 100 frames per second, pretty much as high as your computer can handle. And for us, update is called every single frame. So between those tiny intervals, that 1/60th of a second, we keep calling whatever is in here over and over again. So for something like the movement, where we're pressing on the keys and the ball is moving, that's going to be handled in something like update, where every single frame we want to see, what is the player pressing right now? Should we move it? Should we not? What should we do? So that's what we're going to be using update for mostly. So with this, we want our camera to follow the player. So that means every single frame, I want my camera to be behind the ball and looking at it. So that looks like a pretty good candidate for using update to me. So let's go ahead and do that. And if we draw this out real quick, so say we have our ball, right here, and we have our camera right here. Maybe looking down like that. So this is how the game starts. We have our camera right here, ball right here, and there is an arrow pointing from this to that in 3D space somewhere. You can sort of imagine it. Like if you go to the right, like maybe like 5 units and you go up like 2, then you're going to get to where the camera should be when you start the game. So what we want to do when we're creating this script is we want to save this value and then keep putting the camera at that position. So say if the ball goes over here, then we want to take this and say, okay, well the camera should be probably right about there, and then just place the camera there, and we're good to go. So that's going to be how we're approaching this code right here. So let's go ahead and start it out. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a variable. So this is going to be a variable to store this arrow right here. So we're going to type in private. You don't need to type it, but I like typing private. And then vector3. And then you're going to, I'm just going to call it like offset. So the offset from the ball to the camera. And then you're going to put a semicolon after it. And that's just C# syntax for how we do things. So this means that we now have a vector3, which is a vector that has 3 elements, so a 3-dimensional arrow, and it's called offset. So what we want to do now is at the beginning, in start, right when we start, we want to save and figure out what this is. So we're going to say offset equals, and then there's some vector math to this, but you'll have to trust me. If we take this position and subtract this position, it's going to give us this arrow. So we're going to do that right now. So we're going to say, well, I don't know, how do we even start? We don't have access to the ball. So we're actually going to have to get access to this ball somehow. So to do that, let's go up here, and above our private vector3, let's make a public variable. So call it public, and then I'm going to call it transform with a capital T. And you can just name that whatever you like. I'm going to call it ball. So a transform is, and we can actually see this within Unity, a transform is this part right here. So you can see every object has a transform, and it represents its position, rotation, and scale. So this is really useful. We want to get the position of the ball, so we should get its transform. Cool. So now we have this. We have our ball as a transform. So we're going to say, let's take this. So when I say this, I mean the current object. So if we place this on the camera, it's going to be the camera. So this, then we're going to press dot, and dot means that you can sort of access stuff inside of it. So we can say transform. So like I just said, every object has a transform. So we're going to access the camera's transform. One sec, I'll finish this one up. This dot transform dot position. And if we mouse over this one really quick, you actually see it's going to give us a vector3, which represents its position in space. Perfect. That's what we want to work with. Yeah?
What does offset do again?
Offset, we're going to be, it's going to be this arrow right here, this 3D arrow that points from the ball to where the camera starts out, and we're going to keep using it wherever the ball goes to figure out where the camera should be.
So does it like change the position of the arrow, or is it just represent the arrow?
It just is to represent it. Yeah, it's to store it somewhere, because otherwise we can't store it. Yeah?
Why don't you say something like ball dot position? Why don't you say something like ball dot position?
That's our next step. Yeah, so this dot transform dot position, and then, like I was saying, what you want to do, if you want to get this arrow, is you want to subtract this one from that one. So we're going to say minus ball dot position, and then plop a semicolon after it. So that's going to be there to store our arrow. Quick disclosure note, this right here isn't totally necessary. You could omit it. I think it's pretty nice for like sort of showing what we're trying to do, which is accessing the camera's position.
How exactly does it access the camera's position?
So pretty much it just, whenever you create an object, it has a transform component, and that's stored right here, so you can see if it position X, Y, Z. So it goes in and it'll access it, and as you're going to see in a little bit, we're going to be putting our script onto the camera, so I'll be able to access it. Cool. And now update. So what do we want to do? We want to move the camera to always be at this position from the ball. So the way we're going to do that is by taking the ball's position, adding this arrow, and placing the camera there. So let's start out with the camera. So let's do this dot transform dot position, and make that equal to ball dot position plus that offset that we just stored. So now on every single frame, we're going to take the ball's position, we're going to move it up by offset, and we're going to place the camera there by using this dot transform dot position. Any questions about what we've done? Yeah.
Is there a way to rotate the camera?
There is. Yeah, so I mean, you can do a lot of things. So if you do this dot transform dot rotation, you have access to that. Rotate around. There's a bunch of options for it. Pretty much, there's a lot of things. When it comes to transforms, you have a lot of control. Any other questions? Cool. Okay, so now let's hop back over to Unity. And we have our main camera here. You can click on it. I'm going to press F on it. And you can see it exists there. And now we have our camera follow script. And I can actually just go ahead and drag this script either onto the camera up here, or if you have it over here, you can drag it there. I'm just going to drag it straight onto the camera. Up. And you can see our camera follow script just popped up on our main camera. And funny enough, there's a thing right underneath that says ball. And it's looking for a transform, but it doesn't have any right now. So that actually corresponds to this public variable that we made previously, the public transform ball. We now can access that from within Unity and drag things onto it and sort of assign it. So what we're going to do is if we go back into Unity, we have our ball that doesn't have a transform. I'm going to grab the ball right here and just go ahead and drag it into that slot. Up. And there we go. Now it's attached. Anybody having difficulty getting the script onto their camera and dragging the ball over?
Yeah. How do you compile this? Are you supposed to compile?
Unity will do it. Unity will handle it for you.
So you drag the ball into the
Yeah. So on our camera follow right here, this is our script that we attached. There's this ball variable. And then you take the ball right here from the hierarchy. And if you click on the camera, you grab it and just drag it into it. Boop. Cool. So now let's test it out. I'm going to press play. 1 second. I got to. And if I move, the camera's going to move with my ball. So now if I hop down to this floor down here, I can actually see what's happening, which is great because I would like to be able to play my game. If I jump, I get a nice high view. That's good. So this is what your camera follow script should look like. It should be following the ball at the same distance that it started out at. Oop.